prevention and what my role is with prevention in general. I have been doing prevention in Wyoming since about 2003. I know I'm really not that old, I've been doing it for a while. But this career found me. I did not look for this career. It's not something that I wanted to go out and change communities and make a difference in. But being a mom and being in a community, it has been some of the best work of my life. And but I want to take my prevention hat off for a minute, and I want to talk to you as a mom and tell you my story. So this is Alexander Cole Young. This is my son. This is a nephew, a son, a grandson. He was born September 29th, 1992, and he changed a whole lot of lives at that time. He was a very old soul from the very beginning. This is a kiddo that loved with his whole heart, and when we talk about love, we talk about every person that met him loved him. They were instant friends. He opened his heart to people. He loved the world. He loved life. He loved sports. One of our favorite stories about Alex, which his nickname is Lexo, so I might say Lexo, I might say Lex. But one of my favorite stories about him is when he was 5 years old, my husband and I came upstairs one morning, and he says, "Daddy, did you know there's this TV station that plays sports all the time? That's it. That's all. It's just sports." And he was so excited. And my husband said, "Yeah, ESPN." He said, "That's the one. That's the channel." And from then on, he had this love affair with sports that just, you can't even match how much this kid loved sports. And he knew every team. He just, everything about life he could put in sports. And not only was he loved life, but he was kind. He was smart. He was smarter than most of us in the family. But he was also tenderhearted. He got his heart broke. But that's what made him who he was. This is a kid that when he got his license and he had to fill out the donor card, he did that, didn't even tell us he was doing it, and he went and made all his friends do it. He went to all of his friends and said, "We have to do this." And he brought donor cards to them and said, "When you get your license, we all have to be donors. We need to do this." And that's just the person he was. Today was really challenging for me. This is the first time I've told this story, so thank you for being my first audience. But it was very challenging for me to try to put my son's life in 15 minutes. As parents, we should have a whole lifetime to talk about our kids, to brag about our kids, to make memories with our kids. And I have to put it in 15 minutes. And I have to tell you how amazing he was and what he meant to the world in those 15 minutes. It's a real challenge. Not unlike the challenges that we have in prevention. And the challenges that I'm going to ask you to face at the end of this, I'm going to challenge you to make a difference. And I just want people to know that when this young man left this world, he left a lot of people behind that really loved him. And a lot of people that were really struggling to figure out why. What happened? How did this happen? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we lost our son. September 2013, he was getting ready to start his junior year at the University of Wyoming. He was an architectural engineer student. He had 17 hours that semester. He was really ramping up to do the stuff he loved. He loved designing, he loved drawing, he loved the CAD program. He really wanted to go out and make beautiful buildings for the world. He really wanted to build sports stadiums, but we weren't sure that was something that was in the cards. How many sports stadiums do we need? Apparently a lot. But he was UW, he was going to UW. This is a kid who played soccer from the time he was 8 years old. He loved soccer. And that year, the University of Wyoming brought back the UW club team. And he was so excited. He hadn't lived at home since his freshman year of college. He came home and he said, "I need my cleats. I'm gonna go try out. I'm really nervous." He'd played intramurals, And the only reason he didn't pursue soccer at a collegiate level is he was really invested in being an engineer. He wanted to be an engineer, he wanted to focus on his studies. And none of the schools that he looked at that had the program he wanted had soccer also, so it didn't fit in his world. But he was really excited to play club soccer. So in September of 2013, this kid is living the life he's always wanted. He goes to try out, he's a starter on the UW club team. Their first game is September 7th at School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. And he just was on top of the world. This was a kid who loved soccer and he couldn't get enough of it. And he's even passed that love on to his cousin who is now playing at a collegiate level. So this is what it meant to him. Soccer was everything. So at that game, my husband and I weren't able to go. We were going to go to the next weekend in Boulder. And he tells us that he got a concussion during the game. So he went to a trainer. Yes, you have a concussion. You need to see a doctor this week, and then you need to follow up with protocol at your university. We felt really good about the care our son got that week. This was his 4th concussion in 5 years. This was nothing new to us. This is a kid who'd had several concussions. We knew sort of what to expect, but we didn't really know what to expect. This was within the same time frame that Junior Seau took his own life. We didn't have that frame of reference at this time. So that whole week we checked on our son. Things are good. He's doing protocol. He's going to his trainers. He was excited because, as a lot of you remember, that's when Estes Park flooded. And so all the games in Colorado for soccer were canceled. So he wasn't going to miss a game. He was super stoked that he had another week to go through concussion protocol. But he was struggling. He was struggling that week. He was having memory lapses. He couldn't sit at his computer. He was struggling. But it was more along the lines of, and I just said, your brain needs to rest. Your brain needs to rest. So on a week later, September 14th, normal day, so we think. My husband and I got up. He was going to come over and watch the Husker game with us, go Big Red. And he didn't come over, but he called. Huskers lost to UCLA, which is a big rival. Bad thing in our family when the Huskers lose. So he called and we had a conversation. He was super excited about the day. He had to work. He worked at the Hilton, and on game days he made a ton of money. So he had to work that day. It was a home game. He was going to go to tailgate, see a few friends, go to work. We were going to go to the Hilton, have dinner, and when he got off, we were going to go to the movies. His grandma was in town, and that was our plan. We get off the phone about 12:30. That's the plan. I go off downtown to meet up with some friends to watch the game. About 3:30, my husband calls me and says, I don't know what's going on, but Lex just called and he's not himself, something's wrong. But don't worry, let me take care of it. I got this, let me take care of this, okay? Because as a mom, I tend to overreact. Sometimes I don't always have a level head about myself, so I said, okay. But didn't know the extent of what was going on. Alex had called his dad and said a friend's name and talked to him like he was this friend. And Adam said, Lex, this is Daddy. I don't know who you meant to call. And he goes, oh, hey, Dad, and went back to talking to him like a friend. My husband's very concerned at this point. He's going to go find him. He's supposed to be at work, so he heads to the Hilton. By the time my husband gets to the Hilton, my son had been jumped by a group of guys for wearing a Husker hat at a UW game. And he had a large contusion on the side of his face. And we never really got the full story. The guy said that he approached them. We don't know. I mean, we'll never know that full story. But then he told my husband, your friends jumped me. He thought it was people he knew. He couldn't process who it was. So that day, he was confused. He didn't know who people were. He was confusing other people for people he thought it was. He was really not connecting the dots. We had no idea this was the concussion. My husband comes home about 6:30 and says, Lex jumped in the car with a roommate and left. I didn't know what else to do. But he said, that wasn't my kid. I don't know who that was, because that was not my kid. He's on drugs. He's something. Like, we really couldn't figure it out. So we make some phone calls, try to figure out where he is, connecting with friends. Get another phone call at 8:30. He's upset, but he's completely confused. He doesn't know where he is. Things aren't making sense to us at all. We have no idea what's going on. We can't figure out what is happening. And we knew he had drank when we saw him earlier in the day, but that was so not typical of him because when he was very responsible, he never drank before he went to work. This just isn't something our kid did. You know, he did it typical college partying, but this was not our kid. So I was worried about him at 8:30. I thought he was lost, going to get hit by a car. He just was out of his mind. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. He called his uncle, so I talked to my brother, and my brother said, all right, I told him to call when he gets home. We'll figure it out, we'll find him. So he calls my brother, calls his uncle, same thing, just confused, and he doesn't know what's going on, and he's scared, and we're just trying to figure out what's going on. So we think he's home. But then we start getting calls from roommates. And we don't know these kids very well. He just lived there a couple weeks. And so we start trying to call him. He's not picking up. We can't track his phone. Not sure what's going on. This is, late in the night, close to midnight, and our doorbell rings. So for any parent that knows, your doorbell rings at 12 o'clock at night. It's not a good thing. And in a small community like Laramie, you open the door, and you know the cops that are standing on your door, and just behind them is the coroner. It's every parent's worst nightmare. And all they said is, he didn't make it. Every parent's worst nightmare. What do you mean he didn't make it? It's a blur from there. They tell us to go to the emergency room. That's where he is. All I could think is, well, he's at the emergency room, right? Why would he's at the emergency room? Things fine, everything's fine. But when you walk into an emergency room and you see first responders that you've known for a very long time, bawling, in tears, and they can barely look at you, that's when I knew. My son had died by suicide that night. He had taken his own life because he didn't know what else to do. He didn't know how to deal with what was going on in his brain. But we didn't put that together. The first responder said, what happened? You guys, this is not Lex. He wouldn't have done this. See, he knew these first responders. One of them was a soccer coach that he had known most of his life. The nurses in the emergency room that night knew us and said, this is not Alex. What happened? What is this? What happened? We had no idea. And when we told them that he had a concussion exactly a week before, light bulbs started coming on. Not for us. Still didn't make sense to us. But that week, as we started to piece it together, we started to realize that it wasn't just a concussion. Our son was suffering with a brain trauma. 4 and 5 years, it's a lot for any brain. Our brain is hard to heal. But this was a complete shock, obviously. But we didn't understand that how could this kid, this gorgeous kid, might I add, with these dimples and this smile that lights up a room, that loved everybody, that was on top of the world and playing soccer and on his way to being an engineer, which is something he dreamed about since he was a kid, how could he take his own life? How could he do this to us? And I can go on and on and on about the emotions and how hard this is. And when your kids are born, you think if something happens to that kid, there's no way I'd live through it. The hard part is, your heart keeps beating, even after theirs doesn't. But I don't want other families to have to ever go through this again. And we've got a lot of work to do around suicide prevention. This isn't a kid that had mental health issues. This isn't a kid that had a history of depression. This isn't a kid that had schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety. He didn't have any of that. This is a kid that had a brain trauma, had some alcohol, too much alcohol, I might add, and decided the only way to end the suffering, because he could barely deal with life that week. He couldn't get through classes, he couldn't go to work, he was struggling, and he didn't know what else to do. So this gorgeous, 2 weeks from his 21st birthday, decided this was the only route. Because none of us thought to ask what else. So I challenge you today. We need to talk about prevention, but we need to talk about it in a structured way. We need to build coalitions that really matter and not just look at the emotion of it. It's emotional, it's hard, it's heartbreaking. We've got work to do. We need to look at the data. We need to move forward and build really good coalitions in our communities and look at people as people, and that this is a really personal thing. Suicide's a personal thing. Thank you for listening.